I never thought a quiet evening could change my life. I sat alone in my small apartment, the soft clink of the wine glass against the table the only sound that kept me company. My name is Akira, and for the past few months, life had felt like a series of locked doors, each one closing harder than the last. Betrayal had left a weight on my chest that no amount of wine could lift, yet somehow I kept pouring myself another glass. The world outside my window was quiet, almost peaceful, but inside my mind raced. Faces of people I had trusted filled my thoughts, and each one reminded me of a smile that had turned into a lie. I tried not to think about it, telling myself the past was over, but the sting of being abandoned and used never truly goes away. It lingers quietly, like a shadow that refuses to leave. Just as I tilted the glass to my lips, a soft knock on the door startled me. I froze. Visitors were rare. I rarely let anyone in. Who could it possibly be at this hour? With cautious steps, I walked to the door and opened it to find a woman I had never met before. She was elegant, her presence commanding without being loud, and there was a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her face. "Akira," she said, her voice calm and measured, "my son would like to meet you." I blinked. The words didn't make sense. "Your son?" I asked, uncertain if I had heard correctly. "Yes," she replied, stepping closer into the warm light of my apartment. "And I have a request. Pretend you are his fiancé even just for a short while." I laughed softly, more out of disbelief than humor. "You must be mistaken. I don't even know your son. Why would I?" "You will understand soon enough," she interrupted, her eyes holding mine with a quiet intensity that made it impossible to look away. "This isn't just about appearances. It's about trust, about healing, and perhaps about giving someone a chance to feel alive again." I stared at her, feeling a strange mix of fear and curiosity. There was something almost magnetic about her, something that made my heart skip a beat even though I had no idea who she was. Normally, I would have said no immediately, shut the door and returned to my wine, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the loneliness, maybe it was the weight of everything I had lost, but I found myself listening. She handed me a small envelope. "Everything you need to know is inside. Please consider it carefully. My son, he needs someone like you." I took the envelope with trembling hands, the paper cool against my fingers. As she turned to leave, I noticed the faintest trace of sadness behind her composed smile. It was strange how someone so confident could carry such a quiet sorrow. When the door clicked shut, I sat back down at my table, my glass of wine untouched. My mind raced with questions. Who was this son she spoke of? Why would a stranger think I could help someone I had never met? And most importantly, why did I feel a pull in my chest that I couldn't explain, as if fate itself had somehow reached across the city and tapped me on the shoulder? I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were photographs, a brief letter, and a small card with a name, Riku. The letter spoke of a man who had been hurt deeply, someone who carried a heavy heart despite being a king among his peers. It was strange to feel sympathy for someone I had never met, yet something about his story resonated with me. Perhaps it was the loneliness, perhaps it was the idea that someone else, too, had felt the sharp sting of betrayal. By the time I finished reading, the night had deepened outside my window. The city lights glimmered like distant stars, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, curiosity. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something unpredictable. Maybe this was the chance to step out of my quiet, lonely life and into a story that was bigger than myself. I didn't know what would happen next or how complicated it might get. But I knew one thing. Life had just handed me a door that I couldn't ignore. And for once, I wanted to see what lay on the other side. The next morning, the city was waking slowly, soft sunlight spilling through the tall windows of my apartment. I hadn't slept much. Thoughts of the mysterious woman's visit and the envelope's contents swirled in my head like restless birds. I kept imagining the man whose name was Riku, the Alpha King I was supposed to meet. My stomach tightened with a strange mix of excitement and nerves. By noon, Lady Reina arrived to escort me to Riku. She didn't speak much on the ride, but her presence was commanding, almost like she carried the air of a queen wherever she went. I tried to focus on the passing streets, but my mind wandered, wondering what it would be like to meet someone who had the weight of an entire kingdom on his shoulders, and whether he could even notice someone like me in his life. When we finally arrived at the grand estate, my nerves spiked. The place was massive, elegant, and intimidating all at once. Lady Reina led me into a drawing room where Riku was waiting. He was seated casually on a leather chair, but the moment I looked at him, I could feel the power radiating from him. He wasn't just an alpha, he was the Alpha King, calm, confident, and dangerously magnetic. "Akira," he said, his voice low and even. There was no pretense, no unnecessary warmth. Just a steady, quiet authority that made my heart beat faster than I expected. So, you're the one my mother insists on calling my fiancé. I blinked, unsure how to respond. He was taller than I imagined, broad-shouldered, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to look right through me. And yet, there was a flicker of something else behind them. Vulnerability, maybe, or a quiet sadness he was trying very hard to hide. I'm Akira, I managed to say, my voice sounding smaller than I wanted. I don't really understand why I'm here. Riku stood smoothly, moving closer, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of us. It's not about why you're here, he said almost softly. It's about what you can do for both of us. His words were strange, almost cryptic. But I could sense that they carried weight. Not just power but history, pain, and trust waiting to be earned. It was intimidating and oddly comforting. Lady Reina smiled faintly from the side. Akira, Riku has been through difficult times. Someone he trusted betrayed him. He doesn't let many people in. I nodded slowly, understanding more than I probably should. Betrayal was a language I knew too well. Somehow it made me feel connected. For the next few hours we talked, mostly small talk at first. But with each word, I noticed layers of Riku's personality. He was sharp, perceptive, and extremely careful. He measured his words, watched my reactions, and rarely let his guard down completely. And yet, in fleeting moments, when his hand brushed mine or when his eyes softened while listening, I caught glimpses of someone yearning to trust again. Then the tension shifted. Another man entered the room, tall and athletic, with a playful grin that immediately put the room on edge. This was Souta, a second alpha I hadn't expected. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and he approached with easy confidence. So this is Akira, he said, voice light but strong. Mother didn't lie, he's even more interesting in person. I felt my cheeks warm as he studied me, a teasing sparkle in his eyes. Riku's posture stiffened slightly, and I realized, almost with shock, that Souta's presence had unsettled him. The two alphas shared a brief look, a silent conversation I didn't understand, but it carried tension, rivalry, and perhaps concern. Souta extended a hand and I shook it tentatively. He leaned in slightly as if to speak just to me. Don't worry. I'm not going to bite. Well, not yet, he teased lightly. His charm was immediate and disarming, making it difficult to focus on Riku. The rest of the day became a careful dance. Riku was calm, collected, protective in subtle ways. Souta was lively, playful, and intuitive, noticing things about me that Riku didn't. I found myself drawn to both, my heart pulled in directions I didn't expect. It was thrilling, confusing, and a little frightening. By evening, Lady Reina left us alone, saying she had errands. And suddenly the house felt smaller, more intimate. Riku's sharp gaze softened just enough for me to catch it, while Souta hovered near, always ready with a reassuring smile. I realized that I was standing at the center of something new and dangerous, not in the sense of fear but in the sense of hearts at stake, trust to be earned, and bonds waiting to form. And somehow, even on the first day, I knew my life wouldn't be the same again. 2 alphas. 1 omega. A story beginning that I wasn't ready for, but one I couldn't walk away from. The morning sun poured gently through the tall windows of the estate, casting soft patterns across the polished floors. Akira, sat at the breakfast table trying to calm my nerves. Life had a strange way of tossing me into situations I didn't ask for, and right now I was caught between 2 alphas, Riku the alpha king with an air that demanded respect, and Souta the playful, magnetic alpha who seemed to appear at just the right, or wrong, moments. Riku joined me at the table, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonious. There was something about him that made even breakfast feel formal, as if each gesture carried meaning. He didn't smile often, but when he did, it was fleeting and powerful, like a glimpse of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. You've been quiet, he said, his voice low and steady. Are you all right? I shrugged, trying to keep my emotions in check. I'm fine. Just thinking about everything. He leaned back slightly, studying me with those sharp, calculating eyes. You've had a hard life, he said finally. I can see it. And yet you're still here. That takes strength. The words caught me off guard. Strength? That wasn't how I saw myself. Betrayal had made me wary, cautious, unwilling to trust anyone. And yet, in his presence I felt seen. Not for what I could do but for who I was. Before I could respond, the door opened with a casual swing and Souta stepped in. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and exuded an easy confidence that seemed to fill the room. His grin was infectious, a little mischievous, and his eyes, bright, playful, fell on me immediately. "Morning, Akira," he said, his voice warm. "I see you're surviving the king's company." Riku stiffened slightly at the nickname, and I realized for the first time that there was an unspoken tension between the two alphas, a rivalry that ran deeper than jokes or teasing. Souta seemed to notice it too, but instead of retreating, he leaned casually against the wall, keeping his eyes on me with a teasing softness. I felt my heart skip. Two alphas, both strong, both watching me, both wanting something I didn't yet understand. It was exciting, confusing, and a little frightening all at once. The day continued with awkward introductions and subtle tests of trust. Souta asked questions that made me laugh, and Riku observed quietly, sometimes correcting him, sometimes letting him speak. Each interaction was like walking a tightrope. I had to choose my words carefully because one wrong move could upset the balance between them. At one point, Souta sat across from me and leaned in slightly. "You know," he said, voice softening, "you don't have to pretend with me. I can tell when someone is hurting even if they try to hide it." I swallowed hard. He was right. I had spent so long hiding my pain that I didn't realize how obvious it was. But Souta didn't judge. He didn't push. He just watched, patient and understanding, like he was offering a lifeline without asking for anything in return. Riku, on the other hand, approached differently. His hand brushed mine briefly when passing the sugar bowl, just a touch, but it sent a ripple through me. His eyes met mine for a heartbeat, unguarded and searching, as if asking silently if I would trust him. It was terrifying and thrilling all at once. By evening, Lady Reina had left for her own affairs, leaving the three of us alone. The house felt smaller now, more intimate, and the unspoken tension between the alphas and me was almost tangible. I realized that the balance of power wasn't just about strength, it was about trust, attention, and the subtle ways we affected each other. For the first time, I understood that this wasn't just a pretend engagement. It was a test, a trial, and perhaps the beginning of something more. The two alphas, so different in every way, were already shaping my life, my choices, and even my heart in ways I hadn't expected. And I knew deep down that nothing would ever feel normal again. I was caught between them, and somehow I didn't want to escape. Days passed, and the line between pretense and reality began to blur. I, Akira, had grown used to the grandeur of Riku's estate, the constant presence of two alphas, and the subtle games of attention and care they both played. Pretending to be Riku's fiancé wasn't easy. Each glance, each touch, even the briefest brush of hands, felt loaded with meaning. And somehow I didn't mind. Riku remained the calm, commanding force he always was. His eyes often lingered on me longer than necessary, and I caught him watching my expressions, my movements, even the way I laughed at Souta's teasing. There was a tension there, unspoken but unmistakable, like a storm held in check by invisible walls. When he finally spoke softly in moments when it was just the two of us, the words carried weight I couldn't ignore. "You're not like anyone I've met," he said one evening, his tone quiet, almost vulnerable. "You notice things. Even the small things." I didn't know how to respond. He had a way of seeing right into me, reading the scars I carried from past betrayals and the walls I had built around my heart. For the first time in months, I felt seen, truly seen, by someone who didn't judge my past mistakes or fear. Then there was Souta, who approached differently. Playful, warm, and unpredictable, he brought laughter and light into moments that might otherwise have been heavy with tension. He noticed the little things too, the way I hesitated when speaking, the way I stiffened when someone tried to touch my wine glass. He teased me gently, leaning closer than necessary, his eyes sparkling with mischief, and somehow, it made my heart race every time. The day stretched on, a delicate balance of emotions. Riku's authority demanded respect, Souta's charm demanded attention, and I felt caught in the middle, unsure how to navigate it all. The three of us spent hours together talking about mundane things at first, then deeper matters, hopes, fears, and memories of betrayal. I realized that the alphas were not just powerful figures. They were wounded, carrying scars I could barely imagine, and yet both sought something genuine, something real. In the quiet of the afternoon, the moment came that changed everything. We had been rearranging books in Riku's library when I tripped slightly, and Riku's hand shot out to steady me. Our hands touched fully this time, not just a brief brush but firm and intentional. His gaze met mine, sharp yet soft, as if he were silently asking permission to be closer. Souta, leaning nearby, noticed instantly. "Careful, Akira," he said, voice low, teasing but with a protective undertone. He didn't move me from Riku's grip but instead leaned closer himself, offering a warmth that contrasted with Riku's intensity. I froze, heart pounding, caught between the two of them. The physical closeness was new, but it wasn't uncomfortable, it was comforting. Safe. Like the kind of trust one hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. And yet, my chest ached with uncertainty. Could I allow myself to care for two alphas at once? Could I trust that they would care for me in return? The day faded into evening, and for the first time, I felt a quiet acceptance of the strange, complicated life I had stepped into. Pretending to be Riku's fiancé had brought me here, but now I realized it was more than pretense. The feelings I had were real, even if messy and confusing. And I could see it in them too. Riku's subtle attentions, Souta's playful care, the way they both seemed to watch over me in their own ways. Pretend or not, we were beginning to form bonds. Bonds that carried warmth, trust, and the first stirrings of love. I didn't know what the future held, or how things would unfold between the three of us. But one thing was certain. Pretending had become something I didn't want to stop. The next morning, the air in the estate felt heavier than usual. I, Akira, had barely slept, my mind replaying fragments of conversation and fleeting glances from the day before. Pretending to be Riku's fiancé was becoming more complicated than I had ever imagined. Every glance from him, every teasing remark from Souta, carried unspoken questions, desires, and perhaps even warnings. Breakfast was quiet. Riku sat at the head of the table, his usual calm, controlled presence surrounding him like armor. Souta leaned casually against the wall, his gaze flicking to me with a mixture of amusement and concern. I felt their eyes on me constantly, each glance making my chest tighten. Then a letter arrived, sealed and unfamiliar. Lady Reina had left it on the table without a word. I opened it slowly, curious. Inside was a note in elegant handwriting, along with a photograph. My heart sank. The letter spoke of a betrayal from Riku's past. Someone he had trusted deeply had turned against him, threatening his family and his kingdom. Reading the words, I felt a pang of fear but also understanding. Betrayal was a language I knew all too well. And now, it had entered our fragile little circle, threatening to unravel the trust that was just beginning to form. When I showed the letter to Riku, his eyes darkened, and a shadow crossed his usually steady expression. I didn't want to bring this up, not yet, he said, voice low, tense. But it seems my past has found its way to us anyway. Souta moved closer, placing a hand on my shoulder without hesitation. We'll handle it, he said softly, eyes locked on Riku. Together. I felt a strange warmth at Souta's words, a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. His hand was steady, reassuring, a reminder that I wasn't alone. At the same time, Riku's eyes met mine briefly, and I sensed the weight of his unspoken trust. He was allowing me in, letting me share the burden of pain he had carried alone for so long. The day stretched on in careful measures. We worked together to uncover the details of the betrayal, each step revealing more about the person who had hurt Riku. I could feel the tension between the two alphas rising. Riku was calm and strategic, his mind focused on protecting his kingdom, while Souta moved with intuitive grace, noticing details that Riku might overlook. At one point, Souta's hand brushed mine while we examined the photographs. The touch was brief, accidental, but it sent a jolt through me. My heart raced, caught between Riku's quiet intensity and Souta's playful warmth. For a moment, I wondered if my feelings for both alphas were becoming something I couldn't control. As evening approached, Riku and Souta argued quietly, their voices low but sharp. I stayed silent, unsure where I fit into their conflict. The betrayal had unearthed old wounds, and the two alphas were struggling to navigate their emotions while keeping me safe. I realized, with a mixture of fear and clarity, that I had grown attached to both of them, not just physically but emotionally. Later, when the house finally grew quiet, Souta found me alone in the library. He sat beside me without a word, his presence comforting. Akira, he said softly, I know it's hard, but you're not just helping Riku. You're helping both of us heal in ways we didn't think possible. I looked at him, heart heavy with emotion. I don't want to lose anyone, I admitted. Not you, not him. Souta smiled faintly, a warmth in his eyes that made my chest ache. You won't. Trust me. We're stronger together than we ever were apart. And in that moment, I understood something important. Love wasn't simple and it wasn't always easy, but it was worth fighting for. And if I wanted to protect the fragile trust and growing bond between the three of us, I had to be brave enough to face the betrayal, to support Riku and Souta, and to allow myself to care. By the time the night fell, I felt a cautious hope. The shadows of betrayal were still there, lurking, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like we could face them. Together. The morning air was cool, crisp, and filled with the scent of blooming flowers from the estate gardens. I, Akira, walked slowly along the stone path, feeling the tension of the past days slowly easing. Betrayal had shaken all of us, but there was something different now, something that felt like hope. Riku followed at a measured pace, his steps precise and controlled as always. Even his quiet presence seemed to carry weight, but I noticed small changes. He spoke more softly, smiled faintly at things that amused him, and didn't flinch as much when Souta teased him. The walls he had built around himself weren't gone, but they had cracks now, letting light through. Souta jogged ahead, then spun around, grinning like a kid. "Come on, Akira. You'll miss the best part of the morning." His energy was contagious, warm and comforting. He radiated care in a way that didn't demand attention, it invited it. I felt my chest lighten, a sense of safety settling over me, even though I had learned to be cautious with trust. We arrived at the gardens, a quiet sanctuary of color and fragrance. Souta picked a small bouquet of daisies and handed them to me with a soft smile. "For you," he said. A little reminder that even after everything, beauty can still exist. I accepted them, my fingers brushing his, and for a brief moment, everything else faded. The betrayal, the fear, even the uncertainty of Riku's mood. Souta's warmth reminded me that connection didn't have to hurt, it could heal. Riku, standing a few steps behind, watched the exchange quietly. I could feel his gaze on me, intense yet gentle, like he was trying to measure how much of himself he could safely give. I swallowed hard, noticing the subtle shift in his posture as he finally took a step closer. "You've been carrying so much," Riku said, voice low and measured. "I can see it in your eyes. I don't want you to bear it alone." I looked at him, surprised. His words were not commanding, nor did they feel like an obligation. They were genuine, and they reached a part of me that had been frozen for months. For the first time I felt seen, not just by Souta's warmth but by Riku's quiet strength. The three of us spent the morning in tentative conversation, sharing stories of loss, disappointment, and betrayal. Souta laughed softly at the absurdity of some of his own mistakes, Riku listened with rare, open attention, and I found myself speaking honestly for the first time in months. I realized that healing wasn't a solo journey, it was something we could do together. By afternoon, our interactions had softened into small moments of care. Souta leaned closer when I winced while examining a thorn from the bouquet, gently brushing it away. Riku offered his jacket when the wind picked up, his hand lingering slightly longer than necessary on my shoulder. Each gesture was simple, almost casual, yet it carried a depth of meaning I hadn't anticipated. I felt my heart growing heavier and lighter at the same time. Heaviness from knowing how fragile trust could be, and lightness from feeling it returned in these small, quiet ways. I realized that I didn't have to choose between Riku and Souta yet, not when both of them were teaching me that love, support, and healing could coexist. As the sun began to lower, painting the sky with soft oranges and pinks, we sat together on a bench, the three of us side by side. Souta nudged me gently, grinning. "See? Life's not all bad." Riku, silent but close, nodded in agreement. He didn't smile much, but his eyes reflected something I hadn't seen before: acceptance. And perhaps, trust. I leaned back slightly, letting the warmth of both alphas surround me. For the first time I didn't feel alone. For the first time I believed that betrayal didn't have to define the future, and that healing was possible, even when hearts had been broken before. I realized that our bonds were forming something new, something stronger than pretense. It was trust. It was care. And it was love in ways I didn't fully understand yet, but I was beginning to feel. Even in the quiet, I knew life was far from simple. There would be challenges, jealousy, and surprises ahead. But for this moment, the three of us were together, and that was enough. The estate, which had once felt like a safe refuge, suddenly felt smaller, almost suffocating. Akira, walked through the halls with a strange tension pressing on my chest. The bond between Riku and me had grown, and Souta's warmth had become a constant presence. But now there was a shadow creeping into our fragile balance, one I couldn't ignore. It started that morning when a visitor arrived unexpectedly. He was tall, sharp, and carried the aura of authority that made even Riku's posture shift. Souta stiffened immediately and I felt my stomach tighten. This was a rival alpha, someone from Riku's past, and he had come with intentions that were unclear but definitely dangerous. Riku's expression darkened as he greeted the man. "What do you want?" His voice was controlled, low, but I could sense the storm simmering beneath it. The man smiled, cold and confident. "Just checking in. I heard you had an interesting companion." His gaze flicked to me, sharp and calculating. I felt like prey under a predator's stare, and the warning in Riku's eyes confirmed it. Souta moved instinctively closer to me, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. It was subtle but protective, a silent promise that he wouldn't let anything happen to me. My chest tightened, torn between the comforting strength of Souta's presence and the commanding intensity of Riku, who now stood like a wall between me and the rival alpha. The rest of the day was a careful dance of words, glances, and unspoken tension. Riku's commands were precise, his movements controlled, but there was an edge in his eyes whenever the rival alpha was near. Souta, on the other hand, was unpredictable, playful in his teasing but serious in his protective gestures. I could feel jealousy simmering in both of them, though in very different ways. At one point, the rival alpha tried to corner me in the study. Riku arrived silently, stepping between us, his presence a shield. Souta followed immediately, standing beside Riku, and for a moment I felt like the center of a storm of protective forces. "You'll have to go through both of us," Riku said, his voice low, commanding, a warning that sent shivers down my spine. Souta added, "And you'll regret it if you try anything." His grin was playful, but his eyes were serious, and I realized just how much both alphas cared for me. It wasn't just a game, not anymore. They were willing to face danger together for my sake. After the rival alpha left, the three of us found a quiet space in the gardens. The tension didn't immediately fade. It lingered, twisting into a mixture of fear, relief, and something I hadn't expected, intense emotional connection. Souta leaned closer, his voice soft. "You're safe now," he said. His hand brushed mine, lingering slightly longer than necessary. "I won't let anyone hurt you." I looked at him, heart pounding. Souta's warmth always made me feel like I could breathe, like the fear could be pushed aside, even if only for a moment. Riku, standing nearby, observed us with a quiet intensity. Then, unexpectedly, he approached and gently rested a hand on the back of my neck, brushing a stray hair away from my face. "I trust you," he murmured, eyes meeting mine. "And I want you to trust me too." I felt my chest tighten. Two alphas, both caring, both protective, both demanding my trust in ways I wasn't prepared for. And yet, I wanted to. I wanted to feel it all, the intensity, the warmth, the safety. The day ended with quiet reflections, the three of us sitting under the evening sky. The shadows of rivalry, jealousy, and past betrayals still lingered, but so did trust, care, and growing love. I realized that life with Riku and Souta wouldn't be simple. It would be messy, emotional, and unpredictable, but it was worth it. And for the first time, I understood that being caught between two alphas wasn't a weakness. It was a chance to be loved in ways I had never imagined. The estate was unusually quiet that morning, but the silence carried a tension I could feel in my bones. Akira, sat at the long table in the study, flanked by Riku and Souta. The events of the past days, the rival alpha, the betrayals, the tension between the two alphas, had brought us together in ways I hadn't expected. Now it was time to act. Riku spread several documents across the table, his sharp eyes scanning every detail. "He thinks he can manipulate us," Riku said, voice low but firm. "But we know his weaknesses." Souta leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "And we'll make sure he regrets underestimating us," he added, a hint of amusement in his tone. I noticed how the two alphas moved in sync despite their very different styles. Riku calm and strategic, Souta intuitive and quick to act. It was like watching a well-oiled machine, but with sparks flying around it. I felt a strange flutter in my chest. Seeing them work together, not just for themselves but for me as well, reminded me why I had started trusting them. And despite my fear, I wanted to help. I wasn't just a pawn in their world, I was part of it. "Here's what we'll do," Riku continued, outlining the plan in precise steps. "We expose his lies, reveal his betrayal to the right people, and make sure he loses his influence. Souta, you'll handle the distraction. Akira," his gaze met mine, steady and commanding. "You'll be our eyes. You notice things. You can read people." My heart skipped. The thought of taking part in such a plan was terrifying. But the trust in Riku's eyes, the quiet encouragement from Souta, made me feel braver than I had in months. "I'll do my best," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Souta grinned, placing a hand on mine. "That's all we ask," he said softly. His warmth spread through me, steady and comforting. "We'll be with you every step." The day was a whirlwind of careful steps. We watched, we waited, and we collected evidence. Every glance from the rival alpha felt like a challenge. Every word he spoke carried hidden threats. But together, Riku's calculated strategy and Souta's sharp instincts kept us one step ahead. At one point, I noticed the rival alpha whispering to one of his allies. I leaned closer, heart pounding, and memorized his movements. My pulse raced not from fear alone, but from the realization that Riku and Souta were trusting me, relying on me, to make this plan work. By evening the plan was in motion. Souta's charm distracted the rival alpha, drawing him away from his allies. Riku moved silently, precise and deadly in his efficiency, exposing the betrayal with the evidence we had gathered. I stayed close, watching every reaction, noting every detail, silently reporting back to Riku. The moment the rival alpha realized he had been outmaneuvered, his confident smile faltered. Riku's calm, unwavering presence, Souta's clever interventions, and my quiet vigilance had cornered him completely. He had underestimated us, and more importantly he had underestimated the bond we shared. After the confrontation ended, the three of us stood together, adrenaline still pulsing through our veins. The danger had passed, but what stayed with me was something else entirely, the connection between us. Riku's eyes softened as he glanced at me, a rare smile tugging at his lips. Souta nudged my shoulder gently, grin wide, his hand brushing mine in reassurance. I realized in that moment that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about trust, about proving that we could face anything together. The experience had strengthened our bond in ways I hadn't anticipated. The three of us, different, complicated, yet connected, had worked as one. Later, in the quiet of the estate gardens, I sat with Souta while Riku spoke on the phone, securing the final details of the rival alpha's downfall. Souta's hand found mine, fingers curling lightly around mine. "See," he said softly. "We make a good team." I smiled, feeling the weight of fear and uncertainty lift slightly. "Yes," I whispered. "We do." Riku joined us a few moments later, standing close but giving space, his eyes holding a mixture of pride and something I couldn't name. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly safe, truly part of something bigger than myself. And I knew this. No matter what challenges lay ahead, the three of us could face them together. The estate was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that made every sound feel sharper, every glance heavier with meaning. I, Akira, sat in the library watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. My heart felt full, yet heavy with emotions I hadn't fully understood until now. The past weeks had been a whirlwind, pretending to be Riku's fiancé, surviving betrayals, helping with revenge plans, and navigating the strange, unpredictable connection I shared with Riku and Souta. And now, sitting there, I realized I could no longer ignore my own feelings. Souta came in first, his usual grin softened by something I hadn't seen before, gentleness. "Hey," he said quietly, sliding into the chair beside me. "You've been awfully quiet." I looked at him, my chest tightening. I've been thinking," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "About all of this, about us." He tilted his head, curiosity softening his expression. "Us?" "Yes," I said, heart pounding. I care about both of you. More than I thought I could care about anyone. And I think I want to be with both of you, not as a pretense but for real." For a moment, Souta didn't move. Then his grin returned, gentle and warm, and he squeezed my hand lightly. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said. "I care about you too, Akira. More than I can put into words." Before I could respond, Riku entered quietly, his usual calm presence filling the room. He stood in the doorway for a moment, observing us, then stepped closer. His sharp eyes softened as they met mine. "I overheard," he said quietly. I feel the same." My heart skipped. Riku's voice, low and steady, carried sincerity that I had come to trust. You really mean that?" I asked, unsure if my ears were deceiving me. He nodded, a faint, rare smile tugging at his lips. "Yes, Kira, I care for you. And Souta, I care for both of you. I want this to be real, not pretense, not fear, not obligation." Souta laughed softly, relieved, and leaned closer to me. "Looks like we all feel the same," he said, eyes twinkling. I felt a warmth spread through me, stronger than anything I had felt before. Here were the two alphas, so different in every way. Riku, calm, commanding, protective. Souta, playful, intuitive, comforting, and both of them cared for me. Loved me. And now, I could love them in return without fear or hesitation. We spent the evening talking, sharing our fears, hopes, and dreams. There were tears, laughter, and quiet moments of understanding. Riku held my hand firmly, grounding me, while Souta's playful nudges reminded me that love could be light, even amidst complexity. At one point, Riku pulled both Souta and me closer, resting a hand on each of our shoulders. "We may face challenges," he said, voice steady, "but as long as we trust each other, nothing can break this bond." Souta leaned into him and I followed, feeling the three of us connect in a way that was unbreakable. It wasn't just love, it was trust, healing, and commitment wrapped into one. The night deepened and I realized that this moment marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just in our lives but in how we approached love. We had faced betrayal, fear and uncertainty together, and now our hearts were aligned. I rested my head on Souta's shoulder, Riku's hand brushing my hair gently, and felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time I wasn't afraid. Because we had each other. Because we had trust, love, and the bond we had built together. And because some connections were too strong to be broken, no matter what challenges came our way. The morning sun spilled over the estate, golden and warm, casting long, soft shadows across the gardens. I, Akira, stood between Riku and Souta, feeling a peace I had never known before. The past months had been a whirlwind, pretending, navigating jealousy, facing betrayal, and finally discovering trust and love. And now here we were, together. Riku's hand rested lightly on my shoulder, grounding me with his steady presence. Souta's fingers intertwined with mine, warm and comforting, a playful glint in his eyes that reminded me life could be light even when it was serious. The two of them looked at me with something I had longed to feel for years, unshakable care, trust, and love. Akira, Riku began, voice calm but carrying weight, we've been through a lot. But seeing you here, it makes me realize that no matter what comes, we can face it together. Souta nudged me gently, grinning. And we will. Always. You're not just part of our lives now, you're part of us. Every part. I smiled, heart swelling. For the first time I didn't feel lonely, uncertain, or afraid of betrayal. We had survived challenges that would have broken anyone else. We had faced jealousy, rivalry, and secrets. And yet, we had come through stronger, connected in ways I hadn't imagined possible. We walked through the gardens, sunlight warming our faces, the flowers in full bloom like a reflection of the life we were building together. Every glance, every touch, every quiet word carried meaning. There were no pretenses anymore, only honesty, only care, only love. Souta leaned closer and whispered something playful in my ear. I laughed and Riku's rare, soft smile appeared, a sight I had come to cherish. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real and it filled me with a quiet certainty. Later we sat together under the largest tree in the garden, the shade protecting us from the sun, creating a small sanctuary of our own. Riku held my hand firmly, his thumb brushing over my knuckles, and Souta rested his head lightly on my shoulder, playful and warm. I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I never thought I'd find a place like this, I said softly, or feel this, safe, connected. Riku's eyes softened. It's because you trusted us, Akira. You let yourself care even when it was hard. That courage, that's what brought us here. Souta squeezed my hand gently. And don't forget, you're part of why we've grown too. We've learned how to trust, how to let someone in. Together we've healed. I leaned between them, feeling the rhythm of our hearts in quiet harmony. There were no words to describe the bond we shared. It was beyond love, beyond friendship. It was something enduring, a connection that could withstand time, betrayal, or challenges. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in gold and rose, I realized something important. This was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, maybe even jealousy or fear. But now we had the tools to face anything. Trust, communication, and love that had proven stronger than any obstacle. Riku stood and extended his hand to me. Are you ready? He asked, calm and certain. I took his hand, then Souta's, linking all three of us together. Yes, I whispered. I'm ready, for everything. With both of you. Souta laughed softly, a warm sound that mingled with the evening breeze. Then let's step into the future. Together. Forever. And so we did. Hand in hand, hearts aligned, walking through the gardens into the twilight, leaving behind betrayal, fear, and uncertainty. Ahead lay trust, love, and a life built on the strongest bonds of all, our hearts, united, unstoppable, and free. In that moment I understood fully, family isn't always born. Sometimes it's chosen. Sometimes, it's the people who fight with you, laugh with you, and protect you, even when the world feels like it's against you. I squeezed their hands, feeling warmth spread through me, and smiled. Yes, this was real. Yes, this was forever. And yes, I was exactly where I belonged.